let's begin. Now, changes in demand can be due to many factors. If you have seen my previous videos, you might remember that I told you that quantity demanded depends on many factors, and we can write it in the form of a mathematical expression, and that is quantity demanded is a function of its own price. Let's say price of commodity X. Quantity demanded of commodity X is a function of its price, function of other commodities. It may depend upon the money income of the person, it may depend upon fashion, it may depend upon his personal tastes, it may depend upon weather, and many other factors are involved. But we broadly divided all these factors into two groups, and we kept all of these constant. And when we keep all of these constants, what are we left with? We are only left with that quantity demanded X is mainly a function of its price. So broadly we can say that changes in demand can be due to these two broad groups. So let me take another piece of paper and write it again for you. Don't mind this line. Let me write it again. Changes in demand, they can be due to change in price or change in other factors. And now that, as I have told you earlier, that these other factors can be prices of related commodities, weather, fashion, taste, his income, etc. Now when I'm first going to tell you the main points. Okay, when the change in demand occurs due to change in price, we can have two types of situations. We can have extension in demand, and we can have contraction in demand. Please don't mind my handwriting. Now, no matter whether it is extension or contraction, we need to remember that in both these cases the demand curve does not move or does not changes its position, it remains the same. So I can just write a bullet point that in both these situations the demand curve does not change its position. Now, how do we say it technically? We say it technically that if there is extension there or contraction, there is always movement along the demand curve. So both of these are movements along the demand curve. Okay, now what is it? What does it mean, movement along? I'm going to make it very clear in a short while with the help of a table and graph. Now, when there is a change in demand due to change in other factors. Now, over here, just remember that these other factors are also called shift factors. These are called shift factors because they make demand curve shift to a totally new position. However, when the demand curve demand changes due to these other factors which were previously kept constant, two types of changes can take place. One is called rise in demand, and the other one is called fall in demand. Now, in case of in both these cases, you can write that the demand curve totally changes its positions. Now, if it is rise in demand curve, the demand curve moves towards the right side of the demand curve. So you can say, in case of rise in demand curve shifts rightwards. Now at this point I have to tell you that never use the words up and down, always use the words rightwards or leftwards. And when the demand is changing, when the demand is falling, okay, what happens? The demand curve shifts leftwards. I hope it is clear. If it's not, let me. Leftwards. Okay, so very briefly, before changing my sheet of paper, I'll tell you that demand can change due to change in price and due to other factors which are also called shift factors. If the reason of change in demand is price, that type of change can be of two types: extension in demand or contraction in demand. In both the cases, the demand curve does not change its position and the movement is only along the same demand curve. While if there is let me shift it here if it isn't clear. Okay, while if the change in demand is due to shift factors, there can be two types of changes. One is called rise in demand and the other one is called fall in demand. If it is rise in both these cases, the demand curve totally changes its position. In case of rise in demand, the demand curve shifts rightwards, and in case of fall in demand, it shifts leftwards. Now, let me explain this with the help of a graph. I hope I'm not going out of the frame and everything is visible. Okay, let's first discuss the changes in demand due to change in price. Now, when we are discussing change in price, we believe that other factors are constant. So let's make a quick demand schedule, just imaginary prices and imaginary quantity demanded of any commodity. Again, I'm not writing the units just to save time and space. Let's say price of price of a pen was rupees 10, then it rose to rupees 20. When its price was rupees 10, of course I have to mention price in rupees and quantity demanded per month. I always forget that. Anyways, at price 10 I was demanding, let's say, since I'm a teacher I use a lot of ballpoints, so let's say I was using 10 pens. Okay, but when the price doubled, I also reduced the quantity demanded and it dropped to half. Let's say I was demanding only 5 pens. Now if you look at this table, I can it simply shows us that when price increases, quantity demanded decreases. Simply, price increases leads to decrease in quantity demanded, keeping other factors constant. The quantity demanded is shrinking, so that can be called contraction in demand. Okay, now I can also write, I'll just write C here to show that it is contraction in demand in this way. Now I will again not draw another table writing opposite values. If you see this table in the opposite direction, let's say assuming that the initial price of this pen was 20, then it dropped to 10. So at higher price I was demanding less, and when the price fell I was demanding more. So my demand is increasing in this direction, or in other words it is extending. So I can write extension on this column, just as I could write contraction. Please don't mind my messy work. So in this direction, this is extension it demands. Simply when demand increases due to fall in price, I can write the opposite of this. When fall in price causes increase in quantity demanded, keeping other factors constant, it is called extension. Okay, now let me draw this okay, just this will become too close to this and become very rough. Let me draw it in this area. Let me draw these two situations and show you the movements. Remember, I told you whether it is extension or contraction, the demand curve does not move. It remains in the same position. There is only movement along the same demand curve. To see that, we have to first draw our demand curve. This is price, our quantity demanded, 10, 20, 5, 10, and let's say 15. Okay, on price 10, my quantity demanded was 10, so I have this point. On price 20, quantity demanded was 5, so I have these 2 points. So when I join these 2 points together, I get my demand curve D dash. Now I can show these extension and contraction in this graph also. Just have a look at this. At price 10, quantity demanded was 10. When the price rose, our quantity demanded fell from 10 to 5. So in this direction, I have contraction. You see, the demand curve has not moved at all. This is movement along the same demand curve. Now moving backwards means that the demand has shrunk, it has reduced, it has contracted. Now looking at the same thing in the opposite way, at higher price, demand was low. When the price fell, demand moved from this point to this point, means it increased. So in this direction, we have our extension. Again, the demand curve remained on the same position. So this is extension and contraction. Now let me explain rise and fall in demand. Now, in order to, let me put this paper in frame again. In order to explain rise and fall, let's please remember that we keep price constant and we consider some other factor as, you know, a reason to change the demand. So let me continue with the same values. It will make my you know, job a bit easy. Let's say price of a pen was rupees what did I write? Okay, 10 and 20, and quantity demanded was 10 and 5. Now this is a normal demand curve. Now let me add some another factor. Obviously, when teachers are at college or schools and when they're working days, they are using lots of pens. But when there are holidays, you know, the demand for such pens can fall. So let's imagine this is the demand for pens in working days. Okay, I'll just write working days, WD. And let's have demand for pens in holidays or in lockdown, let's say. As you can see, I'm using my daughter's marker, I don't have my own marker. Okay, so demand for pen in holidays, at the same price, keeping the price same, I am now imagining that due to change in the months of the year, since these are holidays, I'm not working, so I'm not demanding the same number of pens. So maybe at rupees 5, now I demand only, rupees 10, I demand only 5 pens. Okay, and if the price rises, since my use of pens is very small, I may demand only 1 pen. So this is my another demand schedule where I have kept the price same, and I have taken change in season. This is basically change in seasons, now working days and holidays. Now let's draw these two demand curves in one figure, one graph. Let's take price here, quantity demanded here. Now 10, 20. Now my minimum in both the columns, it starts from 1 and maximum goes to 10. So I can have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 and 10. Let me draw first demand of pens in by teachers in working days. On 10 rupees 10 pens were demanded. So on 10 rupees 10 pens was demanded. On price 20 only 5 pens were demanded. Okay, that's about here. So let me label it as demand in working days, DW dash. Okay, now let me draw this demand in this same graph. So at price 10, when there were holidays, how many were being demanded? 5. And on rupees 20, how many were demanded? Only 1. So I draw these 2 points together. I get my demand curve in holidays. I can show it as DH dash. Okay, now you can see this was the normal working days demand for pens for teachers, and when there were holidays, demand fell from its original position and shifts leftwards. This is what I told you, that when demand falls due to other factors, other than price, it shifts leftwards. So this is our fall in demand. Now in your books you may have a different table and a different graph to show rise in demand, but you can do this job in one table on one table and one graph as well. If you imagine that these were holidays, it was a holiday season and all the schools and colleges opened up, we can just imagine that the lockdown finishes and the normal routine starts. So this will be our original curve where teachers are demanding lesser quantity of pens, and when the normal routine starts, there's going to be inshallah hustle and bustle, and the demand for pens is going to jump. So this means in this direction we have rise in demand, and you can see that this is a rightward shift. I always tell my students never to say the demand moves up and the demand moves down. You're going to mess this concept up in the law of supply. So never use up and down, always say rightwards and leftwards. So the final points is, when the demand rises, we have a shift that is rightwards. You can remember rise for rightwards, R and R. And when the demand falls due to any factor other than price, over here we took holiday season as our factor, so then there is a fall, we move leftwards. Okay, now what can be other factors other than holiday seasons? I've already discussed those. These are called shift factors, and they can be change in prices of other commodities, change in weather, change in taste, change in population even, etc. Okay, all these factors can cause demand to rise and fall, and that's about it. Thank you.